In this video, I'm going to show you how Dream and George code the plugins for their Wherever We Look challenge videos. In these videos, they make it so wherever they look turns to random blocks, turns to bedrock, or even explodes. This is going to be a more advanced video compared to the rest in this series, so make sure you watch all the previous episodes before we start. Make sure to subscribe so you never miss another Minecraft coding tutorial and get updated whenever I upload. So I've already set up the project file that we're going to be using for this today. For this example, I'm going to be doing the plugin for the Wherever I Look turns to a random block. I've already set up the project file. I have imported Spigot, and I'm going to be using 1.15.2 for this. I have created the main file. I have created a subdirectory for our listener. And I've created this listener file. So here is our main file. This is completely done. So if you'd like, you can copy this down. Obviously, you want to change some of these values. If you watched the previous episode, you would know what most of this is. And if you haven't, make sure you go and watch those videos first. I've also made the plugin.yml file as well. And this is pretty standard, the name, the version, the author, and then the main. This is the most important part of this. So you just want to make sure that this is the proper directory that leads to your main.java file. So you can see I have me.jag.randomblock, and here I have me.jag.randomblock.main. And so all the capitalization should be the same, and that should work. Now we can go into our actual listener file. And this is going to be a little bit more complex than the previous examples. More of a prerequisite knowledge of coding is needed for this, but if you just want to copy the code, then I'll be going through that as well. So we basically have our rudimentary listener set up. We're implementing listener, and then we're creating the constructor, this.plugin equals plugin, and then we add the listener to the register. And for this listener, we're going to be using a move event or a player move event. And basically what this does is every time the player moves or rotates their head or looks a different direction, then this event gets run. And we're using this because basically how this plugin works is every time you're looking at a block and you look away from that block to a new block, the block that you were looking at initially changes. So to get started, we're just going to get our kind of normal values from this. So we're going to do player p equals e.getPlayer, and then we're going to import player. And we want to make sure again that it's org.bucket that you're getting, not from Java or any of this other stuff. And we're going to get the block as well. So that's going to be p.getTargetBlock. And we can just set this material value to null, so this will select any block that we're looking at. And then this next argument is how many blocks away it should be looking. So basically the max amount of blocks that it can look in any distance from you. So we're going to use 100 for this, so basically just meaning that it will look for the closest block up to 100 blocks away. Import this as well, making sure to do org.bucket. And now we want to get the location of that block, so we're just going to name this block and then b.getLocation. So that gives us a location value for that block, which we're going to be using a little bit later on. And then we're also going to want the material of the block. So let's just do bmat equals b.getType, I believe. So now we have most of the values that we'll need to complete this. And so here's where we can kind of move around in different directions based on what we want to happen within the code. So if you're doing this for fun and you don't want to try and beat the game, then you can skip this part that I'm about to go through. But if you are trying to beat the game, then we have to add this step. And that is to basically make it so Obsidian, end portal frames, and portals and nether portals are completely ignored by this plugin. Because if you think about it, if you're setting up a nether portal and you place down Obsidian, you look at the block and then you look away and the block changes. So it's impossible to make another portal. the only way that we can do that is by ignoring this from the plugin. So we're just going to do an if statement. Alright, so I finished adding these. We're going to make it so if the material is obsidian, end portal frame, end portal, or nether portal, we don't do anything. So we're just not going to put anything in this if statement, which means that it will just skip this whole thing and then finish its run of the call. And then we also want it to ignore air, cave air, and water, because, you know, especially for air, it's going to find the air block that's right in front of us and change that to a random block. So we don't really want that to happen. We only want it to be affecting blocks that are already like physical solid blocks, not air. Now we're on to the actual program itself. And remember, if you don't really care, you can leave out these obsidian ones, but I would definitely keep it the air, cave air, and water. Alright, so now this is where it gets a little bit more technical, and some prior knowledge of coding might be required, but I will try and go through it the best I can. So we're going to start by adding a string, and that's going to be called name. And so we're going to use this to get the player's name. And so now we need a way to store which block was the last block every player looked at. So a good way to do this is using what's called a hash map in Java or a dictionary in Python. And what it does is it basically allows you to have a key or a password and then a value. So you can give the key to the dictionary and it will give you back the value associated with that key. So for this instance, we're going to be using the player's name as the key, and we're going to be using the location of the last block that they looked at as the value in the dictionary. Every time we get one of these calls, we're going to check to see what the last block the player looked at. If they're the same, we're not going to do anything, but if they are different, then we know that the player looked away from a block, so we need to change that block to a random block. We need to go back up here and add some stuff. So the first thing we're going to do is go here, do public hash map player PLB for player location block. And so now we have to put in the types that we're going to be using. So we're going to have a string as our key, and then a location as our value. We can import hash map, and this is a Java utility, so we're going to import the Java one. Okay, and after we create this hash map, we also have to go in here and create it within the constructor, so each instance of this plugin gets it. So we're going to do this.plb equals new hash map, and we're going to do string and location as we did before. Okay, so now we want to check if the hash map contains the player, because if we check the hash map and the player isn't in the hash map, then we're going to have issues. So we have to do if plb dot contains key and then name, then we do something, and then else if it doesn't contain the key, then we do something else. So this is where our actual code is going to go. But if the name of the player is not in our PLB yet, then we want to add our player name. So we are going to do plb.put, and this adds a value to our hash map. And so our key is name, and our value is block, which is our block location. So now we can go on to doing the code for if the player is already in our dictionary or hash map. So now we're going to be considering that we have just looked at a block, or we've moved. So now we have all these values. So we got a new player run, we got a new block, we have a new block location, and the new block material. So now we need to compare the new block that we just looked at to the old block, which would be in the hash map. We have to do location, and we can do old location. So this is the location that's going to be in the PLB or hash map. And then we can do plb.get name. So this is going to get the location of the block that we looked at the last time we moved. So now we're going to do an if statement, and we have to compare the values of the new block and the old block. we're doing if the old block X value is not equal to the new block X value, or the old block Y value is not equal to the new block Y value, same for Z, then we do what's in here. So if they are the same block, then we're not going to do anything. So we don't need to do another if statement outside of this. And then this becomes our new area of operation. So what do we want to do when we look at a different block is what's basically going on in here. This is where you can be creative. For our example, we're going to be changing our value to a random block, but you could more easily actually just change each block to be bedrock, or a prime TNT, which would cause it to explode, or something like that. Obviously for the random one it's a little bit more difficult, so we can go through that. And I want to start at the end because this might be something that you wouldn't think of, but it's just something that you need to do to make sure that this works. We have our old block set, which is our block that's in our PLB, and we have the new block, and we're looking at this new block. So now we want to change the block that's in the PLB to our new block. We can go PLB.replace, and we do the same thing, and we do name for our key and block for our new block location, and that's it. So now we're on to our random block. We want to start by doing an if statement, and I'm just going to copy this because it's pretty similar actually, but we will come back to this in a little bit. So the first thing we want to do is create a random variable. So I'll just call this R&D equals new random. So this is how you make random numbers in Java. We're going to import random, which is a Java utility. So we're able to make random numbers, and we want to get a random block every time. Well, it's pretty fortunate for us that we can just add every material as an array to our function, and that would allow us to index through each material, so picking a random integer to get a random material. So we're going to kind of do the same thing that we did for our hash map. And it doesn't really matter for these if you make them public or private, but I'm just going to make this one private. Private material mats. So that's all we have to do for that. We have to come back to our constructor and add that as well. So we're going to do this.mats. We do material.values. So this returns an array of all the values for the materials in Minecraft. So you get an array of every single material in Minecraft. And it has a red underline because I need to change this from just a basic material to an array by putting 2 square brackets there. And you can see that goes away. So now everything is working here. We can come back down to our random block, and we want to make a new material. And this is going to be our material that we use for this specific run. We're going to do mats, which is our array of every single material in the game, and then these square brackets allow us to index, so we could do 0, and that would give us the first value in the materials list. But we want to change this number so it's a random integer, so it gets a random material from this list. So what we'll do is R&D, which is our random function, and next int, so this is going to get a random integer, and we want to limit this integer value to the length of the list, because the index value only goes to the length of the list. So we're going to do mats.length. So basically, if that material is one of these, then I would just say we should pick a random material to change it to. That's the easiest. So anytime the number for either of these gets picked, we should change it to be something else. So like we can make it, I'll just make it a grass block. Okay. And now the only thing we have to do is to go to our old location, get the block at that location, and then we set the type to be our random material. And then after we set the material, we change our stored value to the new block that we're looking at. And we can run it all again. So this is actually all you need to do to get this to work. I will leave this on screen so you can pause and copy it if you want. Here's the main stuff and the constructor. So you can pause it now to copy that down. and then here is the actual listener itself. If you want to change each block to a specific kind of block, it's a lot easier. So you go up to here, and where we have this random material, you can take all of this out. And when you change this block, you just put in material dot, I don't know, diamond block. And now every single time you look away from a block, it will change to a diamond block. So you can use any material available in the game to do this. But for us, we're doing our mat, so that's our random material that we check from the game. So now we have everything done. We have our listener done, we have our main file done, we have our plugin done, Spigot has been imported. So now what we can do is export this. It says there's some warnings, that's fine, and we are done. So I will go into Minecraft and try this out and show you how it works. Alright, so I've joined into Minecraft, and this is the same world that I was using in a previous video, but you can see that when I start moving, the blocks that I look at change to random blocks. And if you are looking at blocks and it seems like there's kind of a gap, like see how when I look really quickly there's a gap between the blocks that actually change. I think that is mostly due to the tick rate that Minecraft operates at. And also I will say that this does work, but if you're looking at the Spigot console while this is happening, there will be a lot of errors going. But I think that is because Spigot, for whatever reason, doesn't like using legacy block types. And so it throws an error every time it sees a legacy block, which is just a different type of block in the game. But it still works fine. So, yep, if you want to try this out, you can try coding it yourself, or I have a Patreon, and you can download these plugins from my Patreon. The link is in the description. So, if you don't want to code this yourself, and you just want to try it out, then you can go head over to my Patreon and see what it's all about. So I will see you in the next video. Leave a comment below on any specific plugins you want to see in the future, or anything else. So thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. See you in the next video.